every 2 weeks, the Data Protection Forum, where we meet every 2 weeks to talk about issues in the world of uh, data protection and particularly GDPR. Um, I'm Keith Budden from Insurity. We're the people who make GDPR fun. Because it's fun that gets done. If it's a bore, it's a chore. So we aim to make it fun. So hopefully you're going to enjoy the next 20, 25 minutes or so of me presenting about the deadly sins of GDPR. Um, and then we should have time for some questions and answers at the end. And welcome, Neil. Great to see you here. Right, let me see if I can share my screen. That's always the fun bit. And then once we get to there, we should be away. Okay, so hopefully now you should be seeing um the presentation.
Yeah.
So here goes. So yeah, I'm going to talk about the seven deadly sins, GDPR sins, mistakes that could cost you everything. And most of them are things that people don't realize that they are doing, and yet they are. And they're so easy to avoid on the whole. But let's start by going through them. Uh, so we're going to talk about misusing customer data, not tracking consent, weak security systems, failing to honor the rights of data subjects, holding data for too long, which is one I see far too often, no data protection impact assessments. Actually, also going to cover Article 30 registers in that, and what's called ROPAs, registers of processing activity, because that all falls in the same sort of bundle. And no GDPR culture in your business. One of my maxims is that GDPR done right is a mindset, not a rule set. Because if you get the mindset right, then the rules come easy. And then we've got time for a Q&A at the end. So, misusing customer data. What does that mean? Sounds pretty serious. It's you should define and document the purpose of what you're collecting data for. And this all comes down to the Article 30 register and the register process activity. But what do you document? What do you process and why? And the second part of that is making sure that you're only collecting what you need. You really shouldn't be collecting data about individuals just on the basis of, well, that might be useful one day. Um, you need to say, actually, it's something that you've got to use for, that you've got a defined use for. You know why you're going to use it. Hopefully, you're going to use it in a relatively short time period. But the important thing is knowing what you've got and why you're processing it. And sadly, many organizations don't do that. And what I find invariably, if I go into it, work with an organization, is that you start talking to people around the table, and normally you start off with quite a clear picture of, oh, we got this and we got this and we got this and this is what we do, and everybody's quite happy with that. And then suddenly somebody pipes up and says, "Ah, but what about that data we've got on a spreadsheet on that laptop over there?" Or whatever. Or what about that data we collected from that exhibition that we attended? Or what about, and you suddenly get all these what about, and you can't protect what you don't know you've got. And so it's really important to take that time and actually think, what is it that we've got? But at the same time, I say minimize and collect only what you need. If you don't need it anymore, destroy it. Um, then it's about having a clear privacy notice to explain how the data is used. Now, there's a big debate within the GDPR industry about whether it should be called a privacy notice or a privacy policy. I really don't care. The important thing is what's in it, is that it needs to explain how the data is used, what personal data are you collecting from people, how are you using it, how are you keeping it safe, where are you processing it? Are you processing it in the UK? Are you processing it in Europe? Are you processing it in the US? Are you processing it in India? Where are you processing it? Um, all that sort of thing should be in the privacy notice, and explaining in the privacy notice as well how data subjects can exercise their data rights. And also making sure that you have if you have new data or new uses of data that you come along, um, which legal basis are you going to say you're holding that data for? You know, it might just be consent. It might be marketing data, and you just have consent to hold that data. It might be legitimate interest, where you either it's in your business's legitimate interest to process that data. It might be vital interests. It might be because you have a legal obligation to hold that data. So it might be, for example, payroll data. You have a legal obligation to hold that data. Or it might be where you have a contractual obligation to hold that data. But whichever way it is, then you need to make sure that you've got that legal basis for those new uses. Second sin, most common sin, is not tracking consent. Most people now, I think, have gathered the general principle of, you have a tick box on a form to get consent. What a lot of people don't do, though, is they don't record that when that consent was given and how that consent was given. Because if someone makes a complaint to the ICO about you processing data, typically it tends to be for marketing, and you say, well, they gave us consent, that's not enough in itself. You need to be able to say when they gave you consent. So you need a timestamped record of when and how consent was given. And given that that consent increasingly these days is given online, I mean, not exclusively, of course, because it might be somebody signed a paper form, but where it is given online, I always say it makes sense to have your systems to capture the IP address that that person's using at that moment that they give that consent. Now, it doesn't 100% tie down where they are because it might be a public network that they're on, of course, at the time, but at least you've kept a record of the time, date and time they gave that consent, which is most important. Make your opt-ins clear and unambiguous. Don't try and hide what you're asking them to opt in to. Um, and if necessary, make that as broad brush as you need to, so that you cover as many options as you can. And the other thing I would say is offer easy opt-out options at all times, because the regulations actually say that consent must be as easy to withdraw as it is to give. So if all they have to do to give consent is tick a box, then all they need to do to remove consent is untick a box or tick a different box. But it is important that you have that record and track it, record it, and always offer an easy opt-out option. Next most common thing is weak security. I'm going to talk about electronic data mainly here, but I'm going to talk about paper data too, because paper documents fall just as much within GDPR as electronic data does. With your paper documents, it's a question of locking them away when you're not using them. At the end of the day, do you have a cupboard or a drawer where you can take the documents you've been working on today and just put them in it and lock them away? Make it that little bit harder for people to gain access to that information. I went out to see a client recently, and pleasingly, they've now changed the way they did this. But at the time I went to see them, I was talking to the managing director in his office, and behind him was a built-in cupboard in the wall with a door with a lock on the door, but with the key in the lock. And I said, "What's in there?" "Oh, that's all our personnel records." "All right, okay." I said, "So, why is the key in the lock?" "Well, because then people don't have to trouble me to get the key." And I'm like, "Okay." I said, "So when you go home at night, then do you lock the door?" "Yes." I said, "Do you take the key out of the lock?" "No." I said, "Well, it's pretty useless lock then, isn't it, really?" Yeah, I see what you mean. And sometimes it does take that outside pair of eyes to see that sort of thing. I appreciate that. But, it is the sort of thing just to look at and just think, wait a minute, why do we do that? And is that safe and secure? Another one that I had a while ago was I went to see a company. They seemed to be really, really good. I was quite confident about how they were handling their paper documents until we walked back through reception. I saw the back of the reception desk, and under the reception desk was just piles and piles of paper piled up. And I said, "What's all that?" And he said, "That was like, well, that's stuff that's waiting to be filed." And I'm like, okay. And you keep that in reception. Yeah, great idea. Okay. Right, things like that just need to be given a little thought to. But in terms of electronic data, computer data, wherever you can, use the strongest encryption that you can for sensitive data. Increasingly now, I'm seeing this happen, and it's really good that it is implementing multi-factor authentication, whether that's two-factor authentication or indeed multi-factor. Perhaps it's two-factor plus you have to enter a password, or plus you have to enter something additional. Um, and that can work really, really well. What I would say with two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication is don't overcomplicate it. Because again, if you make it too complicated, people won't use it. Um, it's important to carry out regular security audits, and it's important to have staff training on data security and data protection. And indeed, with the new data reform bill, which the government is currently pushing through Parliament, when that becomes law, then it's looking at the moment like data security training will become mandatory. It will become a legal thing which employers have to do. Um, but it's, frankly, most places should be doing it anyway. Um, and the other thing is to have a data breach response plan ready. So if you have a data breach, that's not the moment to then think, what do we do? Have a plan ready so that you can just pull the folder down off the shelf and know what you have to do. And it's important to have a data breach register, because data breach register is actually a really strong requirement, and yet most places don't have one. Now, if you go into an office and say, "Can I see your accident book?" Most places, hopefully, could just produce that. But go in there and say, "Can I see your data breach register?" And they're like, "Don't think we've got one." And it doesn't need to be complicated. It can be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet. It's what's in it that's important, not the formula that's in. Um, and all you need to do in a database response plan, or database register, sorry, I'm muddling my words. All you need to have in the database register is a record of what happened, when it happened, where it happened, who it happened to, why it happened, and what you can do, what mitigation you put in place to hopefully stop that happening again. Um, but by the way, if you are unfortunate to have a data breach and you do resolve the problem and you put in steps to hopefully prevent it happening again, do not, under any circumstances, issue a statement either to the data subject or to the general public saying, "We've taken steps and this will never happen again." Because you can never, I'm sorry, but yeah, it doesn't matter whatever you've done, you can never be certain that something won't happen again. So you say, "We've reduced the chances of it happening again." That's fine. But never, will be careful, because that's a definite statement. Next one is failing to honor data subject rights, because data subjects under GDPR have their rights, and it's important that you protect those rights. So set up a system for handling data requests from data subjects quickly. You do have 30 days from when you've confirmed the identity of the person making the request to fulfill that request. But remember that 30 days is a limit, not a timeline you have to stick to. If you can provide the information within 10 days, then do. You don't need to wait to day 30 to send them the information. So to have a system you can handle a data request quickly. Train yourself to recognize and respond to these requests, because you can have a data subject request form. I've seen them. Lots of people have them. And they say, "Oh, if you want to make request your data, you have to fill in this form." Well, no, you don't, actually. It's nice for the organization if you have a form, and it's nice if people fill in that form, but it's just as valid if someone rings you up and says, hey, I want to know all the data that you hold about me. That's a data subject access request. It's just as valid as if they filled in a form. But you should be encouraging the person making the request to hone down their request to find out exactly what it is they're looking for, because then you tend to end up with them more satisfied because they've got what they want. And hopefully for you, from the side of providing the information, you've actually given yourself less work to do. But you can only satisfy those requests, and this is where it goes right back to what I said at the beginning about documenting what you have. You don't satisfy those requests if you actually know what you have. And if you don't know that Joe's got a copy of Sandra's data on his laptop, and you send out the data to Sandra because she's made a request and you don't include what's on Joe's laptop, but she knows that it's there, you're going to have a problem, because then she's going to argue that you've not provided all the information. Um, so do just make sure that you that you know where your data is so you can find it quickly. And if you've got a CRM, that's great, but make sure it's up to date. Make sure that you can use it and you know where you can find that information. And then we come on to holding data for too long, and this is something which has become more of an issue over the last 18 months, I would guess, than it was when GDPR first came in. It's important to implement a data retention policy with clear deletion timelines. Don't say, "Oh, we hold your data until we don't need it anymore." Yeah, right. Okay. Don't do that. Actually look through the data and decide for the different categories of data, how long do we need to use it? And then document that decision. So, we held a meeting, and at this meeting we looked at the different records and we decided that payroll records, yeah, we were going to keep those for 7 years. And accounting records, we were going to keep those for 7 years. And customer records, we were going to keep for 10 years because we offered a 10-year warranty on our products. All those reasons are good reasons for holding the data, but you've got a clear timeline that you're going to hold that data and for. But, and this is a big but, is it's not enough in itself to have that. You've also got to make sure that you do it. So if you say, well, I'm only going to hold this data for 3 years, you'd have a process in place that makes sure that you're deleting that data once it becomes 3 years old. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly on the day and the minute that it becomes 3 years old, but it certainly should be within a month of that. And so, you need a regular process. Hopefully, you can automate that if it's electronic data, so you don't actually have to stop and think about it. Although, if you do have automated deletion, you still might want to manage by exception, because there might be data there that you want to keep for, even though according to your deletion, your data retention policy, it's reached the point where you should delete it. Maybe you've got an ongoing legal dispute with that particular individual person, and so you don't want to delete that data because you might need to hold on to it for the other reason. That's fine as well, but again, you should document why you're keeping that data, that particular person's data, for longer than your data retention policy says that you would. And I say, then we come on to RAPE, it's the Record of Processing Activity. This is about identifying the types of personal data you collect and why, because you can't protect what you don't know you've got. I used the example recently when I was talking to somebody about this, of saying it's a bit like being a farmer with a load of sheep. You don't know you've collected all your sheep into the lambing pen if you don't know how many sheep you started off with. And so it's just important to know what data you're holding, and again, map out the data flows. It really does pay to do a flow diagram for this, just a flow chart that says this is where this data goes. It comes in here. This is where it comes in from. It comes in from a lead source, maybe. It comes in from your website, maybe. It comes in from HR, maybe. and then what you do with it, where it goes. Does it go out to any external people? If it does, have we assessed the risk with those external people? Are we sure that they're GDPR compliant? And by the way, it's not enough in satisfying yourself that one of your subcontractors is GDPR compliant just to say, oh, well, I've seen their ICO registration certificate. Well, whoopee do. Just getting an ICO registration certificate is not proof in itself that that organization is GDPR compliant. It's a good start, but doing that, getting that certificate just means going online to the ICO website, paying your 40 quid or 35 quid by direct debit. That's going up soon. Um, and getting a certificate. No one checks that. So it's that in itself is not saying that your subcontractors, your payroll bureau, whoever you're using, are GDPR compliant. Ask to see other proof that they are. Ask to see their registered processing activity, their ROPA. Um, and then perform a basic GDPR gap analysis, which is really looking at the risks and your existing security measures and saying where are the gaps, where could things go wrong, and then look at putting processes in place to actually minimize those gaps. You're never going to completely close the gaps. Whatever you do, there'll always be the old exception that might slip through. But if you make that really old exception, then hopefully that old exception will never happen. And then it's about the GDPR culture within your business. You really should make GDPR training mandatory for all of your staff, whether they're handling personal data or not. One of the things that I do when I go out and do training for companies, and I've done training for well over 100 companies now, is as well as giving a full training, which is 4 or 5 hours of training to team all about GDPR and what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing, etc. For those people really working closely with data, I also provide all my clients with a small booklet, which is called GDPR for all employees, and it just gives the bare bones of GDPR in a common language form, which just means that people at least know what it is. Because I had an example recently of a client that I trained well over a year ago. Went back to do some refresher training. Pulled into the car park. When I got out of my car, there was a guy in a forklift reversing with a pallet, and he said, "Can I help you, mate?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm here to talk to people about GDPR." And he went, "Oh, you need Colin, mate. Go in that office there, up the stairs, first office on the right, and you'll find him." Brilliant. That was all that guy needed to know about GDPR. He didn't need to know the ins and outs. He just needed to know where to send somebody who did know about all the ins and outs. And he did that. And if I'd been there doing an audit for the ICO, I'd have started off with a big green tick for that business because it's got the right situation. Contrast that with going into a business like that, walking into reception, saying, "I'm here to talk about somebody about GDPR," and getting a response of "What's GDPR?" Is not a great place to start. So, it is about making sure that the staff just know what it is. Encourage a data privacy mindset in everything your business does. I always say to people, when you're looking at what any process that you're proposing to do to business, to people's data, replace that data with your own data. So if that data was about you, would you be happy with what you are proposing or whatever is proposing to do with it? And if the answer to that is no, then why should anyone else be? And sometimes as well, it's about thinking, well, if that was my child's data or that was my grandchild's data, would I be happy about that, the way they're handling that? And again, if the answer is no, why should anyone else be? So find a better way to do it. Um, if you can, if you've got a team, appoint a GDPR champion to oversee compliance. I deliberately haven't said there appoint a DPO because there's certain criteria under which you do need to appoint a DPO, a data protection officer, who can be internal or external, and indeed we act as an external DPO for a number of organisations. Um, but for most small organisations, appointing a DPO is overkill, and in fact is giving you things just in place which you really just don't need. But do have somebody who's a GDPR champion. Just like these days, I see an increasing number of businesses having a mental health first aider. You know, have someone it is just their job to just to make sure that GDPR culture is carried on through the business, because GDPR isn't just paperwork; it's company-wide awareness. So avoid these seven sins, and you should be well on your way to GDPR compliance. It doesn't cover everything. You know, there is more to GDPR compliance than what I covered today. But if you get all those things right, you're on a damn good start to get being compliant. So we now have time for any questions. We'll just let my contact details come up on the screen. And if you have any questions, please do get in touch with me. But also we'll stop sharing so I can take any questions now. Neil, I see well, I wasn't able to welcome you probably when you came in, and I see the other person who was on the tour has dropped off whilst I've been talking there, so hopefully I didn't say something that bored them to death. But anyway, Neil, good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you again, Keith. I was going to ask, how many organizations, when you go in, do they not know about GDPR?
Probably about 30%, I would say. It's
Really?
actually yeah, it's actually shockingly high. Um, And in fact, that was brought home to me last November. We had a stand at the Great British Business Show at London Excel, and I was actually quite shocked by the number of people who came up to the stand where quite obviously we were doing GDPR and said, "What's GDPR?" And I was like, that is you know, by now you would hope that sort of 8 years in that people knew what it was, but people don't. Um,
And what's the impact if you don't have GDPR compliance or you're found in breach? Motion detected at the front.
Sadly, not as much as it should be, to be honest. Um, you know, I'd be lying if I said you'll definitely get a fine if you're found to be not GDPR compliant, because you won't. Um, Unfortunately, the ICO does not fine as many people as I think it should. I think we could learn from the Spanish regulator on that, because the Spanish regulator issues hefty fines for, I think, often quite minor breaches of GDPR, and perhaps that's going too far the other way. But I always say to people, actually, you know what? Don't worry so much about the fines. Worry about the damage to your reputation.
Yeah.
Because yes, you may not get a fine, but you're going to find yourself having an ISO audit probably every year, rather than lots of businesses go. I mean, if I even say our own business, we've been doing 8 years. We've never had an ISO audit, and touch wood, hopefully that would continue. But you're suddenly on their radar, and that causes problems because they're then watching everything that you do. Um, but the biggest thing is yeah, damage to your reputation, because if it becomes known that you've had a data breach, or you're just lax about the way that you handle people's data, then yeah, it's not a good place to be.
Yeah, you're right. But for some companies move forward across that. I mean, Google got fined, didn't they, years ago? It's,
Yeah,
that doesn't stop people using them. BA, similar.
no, that's right. I mean, again, BA. I mean, BA is obviously the biggest one in terms of UK fines, um, and again, I think of course, they were able to argue that because the breaches occurred during COVID and they were still recovering from COVID, that they couldn't afford the original fine, and so they ended up paying just over £1 million, which is still a big sum of money, but is not what they were fined originally. Um, but equally, on a smaller level, I've had a client who was issued with an initial penalty from the ICO for £10,000, and we actually talked it down and ended up paying 400. So the ICO is not a great negotiator, I must admit, when it comes to having negotiations on things like that. But some would argue at the moment maybe that's where Donald Trump his his negotiating skills from. But that's a different day.
Very topical there, Keith. Yes. Thank you. No, that's all for me. I found that a very informative session. Thank you, Keith.
Excellent, no problem, Neil. It's good to see it. And yeah, as I said, we're here every 2 weeks, or in the weeks in between when we don't have the live sessions. We have our newsletter that goes out, the Data Protection Chronicle, and that's hopefully has good information in it too. So
Brilliant. Thank you, Keith. Enjoy your
great.
day. See you soon.
Thanks for your time, Neil. Thanks a lot.
Bye bye.